I suffered a head injury in a car accident, and the doctor said I might develop amnesia. I jokingly asked who the girl sitting beside my hospital bed was. She paused and said we were just ordinary friends. I looked at Zoe, who was sitting by my hospital bed, and said just friends with a distant and indifferent expression. It didn't seem like a joke. The words got you, didn't I? Caught in my throat. I could only look at her silently. I thought that if the doctor hadn't called her, she probably wouldn't have come to the hospital at all. But I didn't question her. I simply paused, then forced a nonchalant smile and said, "Really? That's very kind of you." She responded with a cold as if I were wasting her time, glanced at her phone screen, and said, "Since you're awake, I'll get going. I have work to do." Before I could react, she stood up and prepared to leave. As she reached the door and pulled it open, perhaps out of a shred of lingering conscience, she turned back and said, "Get some rest." The smile I had been wearing didn't fade until she left and closed the door. Only then did my face turn expressionless. No one knew that Zoe and I were in a relationship. Zoe and I fell in love during college, and after graduation, we joined one of the top marketing firms in Shanghai. Though young at the time, we understood the taboo of office romance, so we silently agreed to keep our relationship a secret. 4 years later, we both got promoted to business managers. By then, it was even harder to go public, so our relationship remained underground until now. I had hesitantly asked her if we should go public, since the company had no explicit rules against dating, but she always brushed it off absent-mindedly. I wasn't even sure anymore whether we could still be considered a couple. But today, I finally understood. The doctor told Zoe I might experience temporary memory loss, but assured her I would recover soon. Despite all the inconsistencies, she still told me we were just ordinary friends. I guess she wasn't afraid of me questioning her once I remembered. She didn't care whether I was truly amnesiac or simply playing a trick on her. She had probably wanted to break up a long time ago. Makes sense. Without breaking up, how could she legitimately pursue Logan? A man's sixth sense is often sharper than radar. In fact, our relationship had already grown dull. We had been together too long, 7 years from college to now. We knew each other as intimately as the lines on our own palms. Any change in her was impossible to hide from me. The clues probably started when her department got a new intern, tall and handsome, named Logan. An HR manager who handled onboarding once told me that under father in Logan's profile, he had written Charles, the name of our company's CEO. A wealthy second-generation elite, tall, rich, and handsome, working directly under his own father's company. At the beginning, Zoe explained her attentive care for Logan in this way. "It's not wise to offend him, and besides, childish boys like him aren't my type. You're really overthinking it." I silently accepted her reasoning. Later, I couldn't tell if she simply didn't take me seriously anymore or never intended to hide anything from me. Within 2 weeks of Logan joining the company, while looking for music, I logged into her long-unused account and discovered that she and Logan were following each other. She hadn't listened to music in years due to work. This account dated back to our university days, when we used to listen to music together, accumulating 8,896 hours of listening time. She had even created a playlist named after me, filled with love songs that reminded her of me, songs by my favorite artists, and tracks she listened to when she missed me during our long-distance breaks. I checked, and she had deleted that playlist. Her recent listening history was filled with trendy Korean pop songs that she'd normally have no interest in, songs Logan often listened to. Since we work in marketing, I convinced myself she was simply staying in touch with youth trends. It must have been my overthinking. So I remained calm and quietly logged out of her account. I'm not the kind to confront someone without concrete evidence. After all, the one who lasts the longest at the table is always the one who speaks and reacts the least. Of course, the coincidences and tacit understanding between her and Logan didn't end there. At the beginning of February, she led her team in taking on a new project. At the time, I was out of town managing another project and only occasionally heard that the contact for her project was a troublesome Brit. After a full day's work with no time for food, I called to check on her project's progress. She didn't answer, likely busy, so I sent a message instead. She never replied. Later, I saw a group photo she posted on Facebook. Logan was beside her flashing a peace sign with a radiant smile. The project seemed to be going smoothly. Her Facebook caption read, "Know yourself and your enemy," while Logan posted a similar photo with the caption, "Win 100 battles." I clicked through and noticed their personal signatures had also been changed to these quotes, echoing a level of unspoken understanding seemingly exclusive to the two of them. I wondered if, at the moment she changed her signature, she thought of me at all. Most likely not. She never responded to my calls or messages, but left a comment on Logan's post. "Eat soon. Take care of your stomach." I touched my own aching, empty stomach and turned off my phone. That was the second thing I endured from her. 3 days later, I was discharged after the doctor confirmed I was fine. That day, I didn't receive a single message from Zoe, but she did send a bouquet of flowers. Holding that bouquet, I decided to give Zoe another chance. I called her from the hospital corridor. It took a while to connect. I gently asked, "Zoe, I'm being discharged today. Do you have time to pick me up?" We both tacitly avoided mentioning amnesia or just friends, as if those words had never been spoken. She remained silent for a moment before finally saying, "I'm sorry, Ethan. I'm tied up right now and can't get away. Shall I arrange a car for you? What are you busy with?" I asked calmly. There was a brief pause on the other end. She was likely surprised. I had always been considerate and rarely questioned her so directly. I knew our first project had just concluded. This was our most relaxed period. Yet she claimed to be busy. She said nothing. I sighed and ended the call myself. A woman's affection, or lack thereof, is truly evident. I remembered when I had just started working after graduation and suddenly developed gastroenteritis at 3 a.m. I called her just before losing consciousness. When I woke up, I found her sitting beside my hospital bed, eyes red from crying. One foot in a slipper, the other in a sneaker, both shoes for the left foot. I couldn't help but smile weakly. She looked terrified, her eyes instantly welling up again. "Still smiling? When I opened the door and saw you lying on the floor, I almost had a heart attack. Next time, call an ambulance first." What if I hadn't answered? It could have been so dangerous. I had looked at her with a gentle smile and said with full trust, "But to me, you're the safest person I know." So, there was a time when she truly cared about me. So we did share a time of sincere, beautiful love. Even though everything has nearly changed beyond recognition, thinking of those distant memories still brings a faint, self-mocking smile to my lips. I shook my head and tossed the bouquet into the trash bin beside me. "You don't like the flowers?" someone behind me asked. I turned around to see an unfamiliar man pointing at the flowers in the bin. He apologized, "Sorry. Yesterday, my driver accidentally hit you. I took you to the hospital and contacted your emergency contact, but had to leave due to urgent matters. These flowers are a discharge gift. Also, I've already settled your hospital bills. I truly apologize. If there's anything else you need, feel free to tell me directly." I gave a silent, bitter laugh. Even the bouquet had been sent by a stranger. I looked up and offered a polite apology. "I'm sorry, I thought someone else had sent them." I sighed inwardly. I've always been a rational and courteous person, but being well-mannered does not mean I am weak or easily manipulated. It was time for Zoe and me to end things. When I returned from the hospital, Zoe was already home. As I opened the door and walked in, she was sitting on the sofa. The TV was on, playing a variety show she had no interest in. She was holding her phone, seemingly chatting with someone, a faint smile on her lips. The glow from the phone screen cast a strange softness across her face. I couldn't remember the last time I had seen such a gentle smile on her face. I paused at the door. She was so absorbed that she hadn't even heard me come in, until I softly called her name. She immediately wiped the smile from her face and looked up abruptly. My eyes fell on her hand. Instinctively, she locked her phone and placed it on the sofa, looking at me with a mix of surprise and confusion. "You've been discharged?" she asked. It was only then that I truly laughed. At her, and at myself. I looked at her gently and said in a detached, calm tone, "Let's have a talk." The breakup between Zoe and me could be described as amicable. We were both rational people, and the whole process didn't take long. As mature adults, we valued decorum. Everything was laid out clearly. There was little left to discuss, as we already understood each other implicitly. When I said, "Let's break up," she didn't ask why. She just stayed silent. I suppose she felt a sense of relief in that moment. After a long pause, she merely said, "I'm sorry." I didn't accept her apology, only calmly arranged the matters that followed our separation. My tone was even, my expression not sorrowful at all. Zoe seemed surprised. When I asked her to move out soon, she abruptly interrupted me and asked, "Ethan, you don't seem sad at all." She furrowed her brows slightly, her gaze fixed on my face, scrutinizing me with a curious intensity, as if trying to understand. Women are truly paradoxical beings. Even if she no longer loved me, even if this breakup was everything she'd wanted, she still couldn't accept my composure. Perhaps, in her mind, I was supposed to beg her tearfully, to plead. Only then could she derive some twisted satisfaction amid her contempt. I looked up at her without emotion. I never told her. I had already grieved. When she ignored my messages, but commented under Logan's latest Facebook post. When she deleted the playlist she had made for me, just so she could listen to K-pop tracks Logan liked. When she looked at me, pretending I was a stranger, and said we were just friends. When she indulged in that ambiguous push-and-pull flirtation with Logan, away from my sight, I had already been heartbroken. To me, she was like a benign tumor, non-lethal, yet growing. Left unchecked, it would slowly erode my vitality and well-being. It wasn't terrifying. So long as it was still benign, I just had to cut it out at the root. The pain would be temporary, but in the end, I would heal. Before Zoe left, after packing her things, I asked her one last question, calmly and quietly. Zoe, did you fall out of love because Logan is Charles's son, or simply because you like him? She turned at the doorway, still as beautiful and graceful as when I first saw her in college. Only now, her youthful innocence had been replaced by quiet maturity. I had always thought she was still the shy girl who confessed to me on the playground, cheeks flushed. But only now did I realize, at some point, she had become an adult navigating the deep waters of personal gain. She paused before saying, Ethan, people always strive to move upward. That line made me chuckle in disbelief, but I respected her for her partial honesty. I looked at her and smiled sincerely. Zoe, then I wish you soaring success. May your ambitions be fulfilled, I said. Her gaze rested on my face, and within it lingered a faint trace of regret. Insignificant, perhaps, compared to her burning ambition. At last, she sighed and said, Ethan, don't hate me. I ignored her. The downside of workplace romance is that after a breakup, there's no graceful way to keep running into each other. Regardless, we all still have to go to work. When the taxi stopped downstairs at the company, I saw Zoe and Logan. It wasn't just the two of them. Other members of their team were there too. It was lunchtime, so they were probably heading to eat together. Logan was energetic, smiling brightly, facing Zoe with his back to the road, animatedly gesturing as he spoke. Zoe smiled faintly, her gaze gentle as she looked at him, occasionally glancing at the people behind in the road, pulling his arm aside when he was about to bump into someone. So familiar, yet so unfamiliar. Since our breakup, she seemed genuinely happy. I remained in the car, watching until their figures disappeared into the cafe downstairs. The driver in front asked, Are you secretly in love with that pretty girl? I laughed and explained, She's my ex-girlfriend. The driver's expression instantly turned awkward, as if he wanted to offer comfort but held back. I added considerately, It's okay, it hasn't affected me much. When I entered the company, Bella greeted me warmly, saying, Ethan, you're out of the hospital? Seriously, you didn't even let us visit. I smiled and replied as we walked. It wasn't serious, and as you can see, I'm fine. How's the post-mortem on the Hong Kong case going? She followed me into my office with a stack of printed documents, handed them to me, then glanced toward the open office area. Seeing no one around, she leaned in and whispered, Ethan, don't look at the data yet. I have something to tell you. I put down what I was holding and looked up at her. She looked indignant and said, Ethan, you know Albert is heading to manage the Guangzhou branch next month, right? Everyone's saying the vacant director position will likely go to either you or Zoe. You two have been evenly matched in performance over the years. I'm not trying to talk behind anyone's back. Whoever gets it, based on merit, we'd all accept it. At this point, she hesitated, biting her lower lip with a troubled expression. I smiled gently and said, It's just the two of us here. Go ahead and say it. She paused and then whispered, But a few days ago, I saw Zoe hugging Logan from her department in the break room. It wasn't exactly a secret in the company that Logan might be the son of our boss Charles, which is probably why Bella was so upset. She felt Zoe was winning unfairly. I found myself laughing as I fiddled with the edge of the documents. So while I lay in the hospital clutching my phone, wondering where Zoe had gone silent, she was off rendezvousing with a rich heir. But it wasn't really a surprise. I laughed at myself and tried to reassure Bella. It's fine. Personnel decisions are made by higher-ups. We'll let things unfold naturally. Bella sighed, and I lowered my head to continue reviewing the data. I was genuinely surprised when Zoe knocked on my office's glass door. After all, in my view, though our breakup had been civil, that merely reflected my own dignity. It didn't mean Zoe and I were still casually communicative colleagues pretending everything was fine. Unless necessary, I assumed we'd both prefer to avoid private interactions, until I understood her purpose for coming. Standing at my desk, her gaze calmly fixed on me. After a pause, she said, Ethan, I thought you would resign. Her tone was somewhere between a reminder and a warning. Ethan, we were together for 7 years. Don't call me heartless. With Albert heading to Guangzhou next month, one of us will be promoted to take her place as director. If I were you, I would start planning ahead and find an alternative path for myself. I looked at her and understood her implication. She was convinced she would get the position and was advising me to resign. Otherwise, once she becomes director and the boss's son is her boyfriend, she would likely force me to resign to avoid gossip. This was her so-called kind reminder, urging me to plan an early exit. I could accept a woman falling out of love and moving on. After all, feelings aren't something you should test, but I didn't expect her to forsake even the most basic decency. I looked at her like a stranger and, meeting her gaze, uttered my first curse. "Zoe, you're truly trash." She remained silent. I met Logan for the first time a week after that conversation with Zoe. After breaking up with me, Zoe, who had always insisted that office romances are inappropriate, openly flaunted her relationship with Logan on Facebook. Beneath the post, countless colleagues sent their congratulations. Only our mutual friends from university were left asking me in shock what had happened. I didn't reply to a single message. The day Logan appeared in front of me was an ordinary afternoon. Most people were either out for lunch or resting at their desks. I was alone in the break room, grinding coffee beans. As the rich aroma began to fill the air, Logan appeared behind me. I stepped aside to let him pass, but he didn't move. He stood in front of me, studying me with a cryptic gaze, and suddenly said, "I know you used to date Zoe." He had a baby face and was shorter than me. I looked down at him calmly, raising an eyebrow in mild confusion. He looked up at me, his gaze sweeping slowly across my face. Not getting the reaction he hoped for, his eyes dimmed slightly. After a pause, he continued, "I saw that playlist she named after you. You two didn't do a great job keeping your secret relationship under wraps, did you?" I stayed silent, patiently waiting for him to finish. He said, "My dad really likes Zoe, you know. She's mature, driven, and ambitious. He says she reminds him of his younger self. My dad wants to mentor her. Zoe has limitless potential. And as it happens, I like her, and she likes me. Now we're together. But Ethan, your presence is an eyesore. I hope you'll take the hint and resign." That's when I understood his purpose. First a show of strength, then subtle threats, ending in a gentle suggestion that I leave. Holding my cup, I looked calm and composed, even with a faint smile. I glanced down at him and said, "Mr. Logan, all personnel changes must follow procedure. I'm not sure what you're trying to achieve with this conversation. Are you here to fire me? If it's about firing me, company policy requires that HR communicate with me directly and provide the reason for termination." His face turned pale. Perhaps he hadn't expected me to be immune to both threats and persuasion. As I turned to leave, I added, "By the way, personnel changes for managerial roles and above require direct approval from the chairman. In other words, the only person in this company who can fire me is the chairman. Mr. Logan, you're merely an intern in Zoe's department." With that, I didn't bother looking at him again. I simply walked out, coffee cup in hand. Not long after my conversation with Logan, the official notice about Albert's transfer to Guangzhou was released. Before her departure, the chairman hosted a farewell banquet for Albert. All management-level staff attended, department heads from across the company. We all knew this wasn't just a send-off. A reshuffle at headquarters was also underway. When the HR manager placed the invitation on my desk, Bella was the only one who looked visibly anxious. She was someone I personally mentored. Leaning over the table, she first cheered me on, then solemnly said, "Ethan, no matter what happens, our team stands behind you. If we can't stay at this company, we'll follow you to another." I smiled and lightly tapped her forehead with the invitation, speaking gently. "It's just a dinner. Have you forgotten my life motto? Build a bridge when there's water, carve a path when there's a mountain. What's there to fear? Besides, I'm not the one who's going to lose." I was emotionally composed on the day of the dinner. In the private dining room, heads of the marketing, management, HR, and finance departments gathered together. Chairman Charles sat at the main seat, with Logan on his left and Zoe beside Logan. When everyone saw Logan, they exchanged subtle glances. It had only been a rumor before, but now with an intern sitting beside Charles, the rumor was confirmed. Yet Charles didn't introduce him, and everyone pretended not to notice. No one asked. I sat beside Sophie from finance, eating and drinking when appropriate, making small talk when needed, and remaining silent at the right moments. No business was discussed. The banquet centered around Albert, both to honor her contributions and to wish her great success at the Guangzhou branch. After several rounds of food and polite conversation, Charles finally put down his chopsticks and addressed the true reason for the dinner. In his early 50s, Charles looked no older than 40, energetic and composed. He scanned the room with sharp eyes, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and said, "Aside from sending Albert off, there's something else I want to say." I put down my chopsticks and looked toward him. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of Zoe, smiling subtly, graceful and poised, looking like a perfect match with the smiling Logan beside her. I withdrew my gaze, lowered my eyes, and calmly began wiping my hands with a towel. Charles spoke in a deep, gentle voice. As you all know, I have only one son. When he graduated, I arranged for him to work here. He has a strong personality and didn't want anyone to know his background. He wanted to rise through the ranks on his own. He's done well over the years. I've heard many of you praise him in front of me. I'm very pleased. Now that the timing is right, and with Albert leaving for Guangzhou, I think it's time to formally introduce him. His gaze calmly settled on me through the crowded room, with a hint of pride in his smile. He extended his hand and gently said, "Ethan, come to your father. It's time for everyone to know who you are." I calmly set down my napkin and smiled. In the dead silence that followed, the only sound was Zoe's water glass tipping over. I looked over at the sound. She appeared composed, apologizing with a smile as she wiped the table with tissues. Her movements were steady, not flustered. Then she looked at me, slightly pale, her deep emotions unreadable. I averted my gaze completely and stood up. Amidst everyone's shocked expressions, I walked toward the main seat, placed my hand on the back of the pale-faced Logan's chair, and politely said, "Mr. Logan, if you could excuse me." I heard someone involuntarily gasp. The dinner ended quickly after achieving its intended effect. I could already imagine the storm it would stir up in the company. But what intrigued me more was Zoe. She once told me, "Ethan, people always strive for higher ground." I wonder if now, she is still on that path upward. I didn't even glance at her, not a single look. Only when the event ended and she, along with a despondent Logan, came over to greet my father and leave, did I hear her restrained farewell. "Mr. Charles, Mr. Ethan, we'll be going now." I remained silent as my father's scrutinizing gaze settled on Zoe's face, then briefly shifted to Logan beside her, before he finally smiled with feigned ease and said, "All right, all right." After everyone had left the private room, his smile slowly faded. He looked at me and asked, "What's going on between you and Zoe?" Yes, I had mentioned Zoe to him, back when I had just graduated, though I never told him we were in a relationship. Given his experience, he likely figured it out on his own. I smiled and met Charles's scrutinizing gaze, responding coolly, "Didn't you see it yourself? Logan took her. His mother excels at interfering in others' relationships. Naturally, her son follows in her footsteps." I paused, then emphasized each syllable as I said, "Dad." The last time I called Charles Dad was when I was 7. At that time, he had just divorced my mother. Outside the villa gate, I tugged on his sleeve, persistently asking, "Dad, why did Mom divorce you? Say something." He said nothing. As a child, I didn't understand. Only as I grew older did I begin to grasp the grudges and entanglements between adults. My father and Logan's mother had grown up together. She had looked down on his poverty and married someone else, while my father married my mother. My mother stood by him as they built everything from scratch. Once he succeeded, Logan's mother returned with Logan, newly divorced, and re-entered my father's life. Back then, Charles was young and prideful, harboring resentment over the way his childhood friend had abandoned him for wealth. The more he resented it, the harder it became for him to let go. My mother never spoke much about the past between the elders, always preserving his dignity in front of me. She was graceful and dignified, and decisively divorced him after the betrayal. Yet after divorcing my mother, Charles never married Logan's mother. He merely kept her around, mocking her for her short-sightedness in the past. He and that interloping mother of his lived triumphantly unaware of my existence, though I was fully aware of theirs. I discovered this when I was 8. I had secretly returned to the villa without my mother's knowledge and saw Charles celebrating Logan's birthday. He held 10-year-old Logan in his arms. Logan's mother stood beside him, and the three of them smiled like a true family. After that, I never called Charles Dad again, and I rarely saw him. Zoe only knew that my parents were divorced. After graduation, Charles asked me to join his company. He said, "All these years I've had no children but you. Doesn't your mother understand that? You're my biological son, the empire your mother and I built. If not for you, then who else should inherit it? That aunt of yours has always wanted her son to join the company, but I've turned her down every time. Ethan, your father still knows where he stands." My mother was proud and principled. When she divorced Charles, she took only what was rightfully hers. I'm not like her. If something belongs to me, why should I give it up? The more something displeases others, the more it pleases me. So together with Zoe, I joined the company after graduation, starting from the very bottom of the core business department and working my way up. Charles knew about Zoe, paid attention to her, and praised her as a talented young woman with boundless potential, only because I had once mentioned her to him. My family background is complicated. I had planned to explain everything to Zoe once Charles made things public, but she ended up surprising me instead. Charles looked at me, and for the first time, I saw weariness etched across his face. He sighed and said, "It's your father who has wronged you." I chuckled softly. It's simply the nature of men. I suddenly recalled what Logan had said to provoke me in the break room, that Charles thought Zoe resembled his younger self. I suppose the two of them truly are alike, unfeeling and faithless. I returned to the company 3 days later, by which time even the most sensational news had been digested by everyone. When I came back, everyone acted as usual. No probing questions, just slightly warmer smiles, all typical office sycophants. This allowed me to breathe a sigh of relief, and I maintained my usual demeanor. Only Bella was upset with me, complaining that she had worried for nothing, never expecting I had been playing the fool all along. In the end, I appeased her with a seafood feast. As she cracked the lobster claw, she asked, "You're the real heir to a wealthy family. Then what exactly is Logan?" I didn't hide the truth and gave her a brief explanation. She looked shocked. "Oh my God, how can someone be so shameless, parading around under the guise of a CEO's heir? Disgusting. Ethan, while you were away, a lot of people secretly asked me about this. Can I tell them? I really can't stand Logan's arrogant behavior. If it were true, fine. But to think he's just a stand-in prince. What's he even showing off for?" I peeled a piece of lobster leg meat for her and said with a smile, "It's no secret. If someone asks, just tell them." I didn't underestimate Bella's firepower. By that afternoon, the entire company knew Logan's true background. When I went to the finance department to process project budget approvals, I saw Logan standing at Sophie's desk. Sophie frowned, pointing at the expense form. "Why are you asking the company to reimburse for a bag you bought? This won't be approved. I suggest you review the other items more carefully. Don't try to claim personal purchases." His expression turned awkward as Sophie spoke. He picked up the form and gave me a vicious glare before leaving, as if I had orchestrated it. I remained silent. Since Charles publicly acknowledged me, I began getting involved in all business operations to better understand the company's strategic direction. Meanwhile, Zoe didn't get promoted to director. Albert continued remote managing from Guangzhou. After I transitioned out, my managerial position became vacant. Since Bella still needed more experience, we recruited a business manager from another firm to fill my old role. Once the personnel changes were confirmed, everyone familiar in the company sent their congratulations, except 2 people. Whether from guilt or some other reason, Zoe and Logan had been avoiding me ever since I returned. Frankly, there was no need. My energy was limited, and there was too much to learn in handling company affairs. I had no time to pay them any mind. Besides, bridges are bridges and roads are roads. We were never traveling the same path. But perhaps they didn't see it that way. Logan was the first to confront me. In the same empty pantry, same coffee beans, but his expression had shifted from arrogance to rage. Standing behind me, he said bitterly, "Hypocrite." I ignored him. He continued, "Your mom acted like she didn't care and left, saying you'd never be involved again. I thought you two really had no interest in the family assets. But no, you're just hypocrites, pretending to be detached while secretly fighting your way back in. If you were truly noble and uninterested, you should have stayed away from Dad's assets altogether. Saying one thing and doing another. You're disgusting and fake." His words amused me. I actually laughed out loud. I really have no interest in conversing with the intellectually challenged, especially not Logan. Bella once asked if I had a plan to deal with Logan. No one might believe it, but I never planned to do anything to him. As long as he remains in the company, others will naturally make things difficult for him. While he's in the company, the one suffering certainly won't be me. Aside from making a fleeting impression through Zoe, I have never considered him a rival from beginning to end. He simply isn't qualified. I looked at him gently, as if observing a buffoon. "Logan, don't speak such foolish words again. Look at how flustered you are. I'm merely reclaiming what's mine, yet your expression is as though I've torn out your heart. If I were you, I'd go home and advise your mother to think of new tactics to win Charles over. How pitiful. After all these years of you and your mother bending over backward to please Charles, you've ended up with nothing more than a meager monthly allowance. Not even an apartment to show for it. But don't worry. Now that I've taken over the company, your and your mother's allowance won't be cut off. Consider it compensation for your years of effort keeping Charles entertained." His face shifted from green to purple, then to a deathly pale. Then he smiled, as if he had discovered a weapon to strike back at me. "I can't out-argue you, Ethan, but I'm not entirely empty-handed. Your girlfriend of 7 years now belongs to me." I didn't even lift an eyelid. Trash belongs in the trash can. If she's yours, then she's yours. What's there to brag about? Perhaps Logan chose Zoe out of affection, but more likely, he saw her as the youngest manager in the company's leadership and someone Charles openly favored. He probably believed Zoe's future extended beyond being a department director. To secure his place in the company, Zoe was his best strategic ally. In a certain sense, Zoe and Logan are indeed a fitting match. They puff themselves up, using and scheming against one another, only to end up with nothing and utter disappointment. The thought alone is laughable. At that point, I was genuinely annoyed. I looked at him with restrained composure and said, "This is the last time I'll be this patient with you, Logan. I suggest you behave yourself at the company, because I promise I'm not always this kind." My words nearly brought him to tears. Unfortunately for him, I'm not Zoe. I don't do tender sympathy. I stood there smiling, appreciating the tears in his eyes. Internally, I mused how delightful they were to behold. Zoe's resignation didn't come as a surprise to me. I truly couldn't think of any reason she would stay. She followed the standard resignation process, and I didn't interfere. But on her last day, for reasons unknown, she sent me a message asking if we could talk. I didn't see anything worth discussing between us. The night Charles announced my identity, she also called, saying she was waiting downstairs at my apartment. Coincidentally, Charles had asked me to stay at the villa for a few days to sort out internal company dynamics. I didn't return home, nor did I respond to her message. After that, she sensibly stopped bothering me. Perhaps because this was her final goodbye, she came to see me anyway, even though I hadn't replied. I've always admired the calm poise she carries, perhaps a trait common among successful people. She could pretend as if there had never been any disgraceful betrayals between us. Her composure was so convincing that I began to question the accuracy of my own memories. Her brows and eyes were indifferent, even holding a smile as if we were old friends, standing at the door asking me, "Shall we talk?" I remained silent as she entered, handing me a cup of coffee. I took the coffee, and we stood side by side in front of the massive floor-to-ceiling window. The night sky hung low, and the towering skyscrapers glimmered with lights. Looking out through the transparent glass felt like being amidst the starry galaxy. I heard Zoe sigh beside me. "Do you remember when we first started working here? That was nearly 5 years ago, two fresh graduates, both standing at the same high-rise, overlooking the lights outside. Back then, she joined with great ambition, ready to make her mark, but was assigned the most inconspicuous menial tasks. Later, she secured a $1 million deal through her own abilities. I still remember the way she excitedly looked at me, her face pale from the pain of drinking too much, clutching her aching stomach. She said, "Ethan, let's build a home together in this city." Eventually, the deal became her superior's achievement, and she only received a bonus of 500 yuan. She used that 500 yuan to treat me to hot pot. She sat across from me, steam rising between us, and I couldn't make out her expression, but I remember her voice. It was the first and last time I saw a look of confusion on her face as she asked me, "Ethan, when will people like us ever make a name for ourselves?" After that meal, I went to find Charles. Since his divorce with my mother, she hadn't seen him again, let alone his money or resources. Even though he gave me an unlimited credit card, my mother and I never used it. That was the first time I asked him for help, for Zoe. I still remember Charles's surprised expression. He was undoubtedly pleased that I came to him for help, but I also remember his pointed words, "Ethan, in the world we live in, if she can't even handle this much on her own and needs my help, then she's not worthy of being your wife." Although he said that, he did take notice of Zoe and praised her a few times in public. Zoe's career naturally progressed smoothly after that. She was both smart and capable. I never imagined that, on this path of dealing with things, somewhere along the way, we had drifted farther apart. She, like an ancient scholar aiming to rise through the emperor's favor, perhaps saw her path to success as a shortcut to the top. This might be her way of defining, making a name for herself. Her tone, emerging from the gaps of past memories, carried a wistful sigh. "How did we end up like this?" I scoffed. "Zoe, don't talk to me about the past. I understand your previous actions, choosing the best tree to roost, but now, don't make me lose respect for you." She smiled as well, tilting her head and focusing on me, not continuing the conversation. After a moment, her smile gradually faded, and a hint of seriousness appeared on her face. "Can't we even be ordinary friends? Ethan, I betrayed you. You hid things from me. Doesn't that make us even?" I sighed and gazed back at her with a neutral expression. "Zoe, I don't know what you mean by being even. The even you speak of is based on my identity as Charles's son. Have you truly never thought about it? If I weren't Charles's son, what would my situation be now? I watched you secretly meet with the son of the chairman of a large company, while I, under your influence and pressure, had no choice but to resign. According to the non-compete agreement, I can't even work in the same industry. All my years of accumulation, work, and effort have become stepping stones beneath you and Logan's loving relationship. While I wandered aimlessly in the cold wind on the streets, I imagined you and Logan must have been enjoying the best life in the city's skyscrapers. Zoe, now tell me, are we even? What do you think? How can we make it even? Finally, I looked at her pale, disoriented face, smiled faintly, distant and indifferent, and politely said, Zoe, there's no such thing as being even. You owe me, and you'll always owe me. I'm not prepared to be magnanimous and forgive you. From now on, dust returns to dust and earth to earth. If we meet again, we will be nothing more than strangers. After saying that, I didn't waste any more time on idle talk. I raised my hand, glanced at the time, and politely said, It's time for you to go. Zoe's figure staggered as she left. Over the years, I had rarely seen her in such a disheveled state. But this was the path she chose for herself. Later, at the industry summit, I encountered Zoe once or twice. By then, I had already taken over Charles's position, walking through the crowd like a star surrounded by others. She stood outside the crowd, climbing slowly, bit by bit, in a new company, at a new starting point. She didn't even have the right to speak to me. Later, while having dinner with Charles, I occasionally heard him mention Logan's love life, saying that he had been deceived for both money and affection, showing no common sense. I don't know when Zoe and Logan broke up, but it wasn't surprising that two people who came together for mutual benefit would part ways for the same reason. I held my teacup, gazing at the blooming, vibrant garden. The deep spring of April, another year had passed before I even realized it. The past, long gone, was like a light boat passing over countless mountains.